We're going to be talking about podcast monetization, but not in the way that a lot of conversations, especially if you go looking online, happen, because they're all very superficial. And what I mean by that is when we're looking at monetizing a podcast, it's these. What are the revenue streams? What can you do to physically make money from a podcast? And there's sponsorship. We all look at, income reports from John Lee Dumas, maybe even Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income. Get your eyeballs big, get yourself excited. Digital items and products. Again, there's countless entrepreneurs we could count through that related to that. Live events, merchandise, Patreon crowdfunding, even indirectly through platforming. And I'll go into a little bit more details with all of these and how they relate. But the reality is, with the online with podcasting, is it's just media. It's part of the entertainment industry. So is YouTube, so is blogging. Maybe you're working to be informative, but you have to be able to capture someone's attention. It's a media platform, not a money bag. It is a component of a business model, not the business itself. So it doesn't matter what kind of podcast that you run. It's comparable to any form of currently existing media. We have magazines, we have movies, we have TV shows. We have all kinds of stuff. As you can see, I lean towards the nerdier side, though I put that in because my daughter won a bet I like Star Trek better. But all of these, if we look at each of these platforms, the way that they monetize is exactly how you can monetize in the podcasting world. Within magazines, it was being talked about in the last one, if you were here. Newspapers have subscribers and they have advertisers. You can have that in the podcasting world just like magazines have. Movies, Star Wars, they have a live event element through Disneyland. They don't have Star Wars, the universe theme park. They leverage themselves through a live event, which makes them money through another company. You can do that with your podcast. They also have crap tons of merchandise and partnerships with other companies that leverage them because they are a bit of media, which is what your podcast is. And Bill Nye the Science Guy, he's even still relevant. And the reason why I put him up there is he's used his platform for children's science education to bring that into the Planetary Society and other elements in that aspect, not even related to Bill Nye the Science Guy, though we know him as that. All of those are the exact same way it works in the podcasting space. It's not new. Everyone thinks it's this new, special, unique butterfly. It's not. Don't think that. Stop it. Okay. So it's just like any other form, especially when it comes to making money. Any type of form you can think of. How making money from media works, and this is where people get lost. You're gonna put a lot of money, time, and skill into the project up front, into the podcast. Make a quality product. You're gonna put money, time, and skill to get attention, to get eyeballs on it. Then you gotta actually work to make it better, because whatever you thought was going to work is probably not gonna be that great, and you gotta get the fuck over it, and then go and change it and make it better. And then you're going to build in those multiple forms of monetization along the way. They're all not gonna happen overnight, and you might even be working on more than one form of monetization while you're making each of them sustainable. Does that make sense? If there's any questions, by the way, but this is just general setup right now. Just ask them as we're going. So, how to monetize a podcast. These are the 6 magical, mythical ways. Sponsorship. This is like the unicorn of podcasting. Everybody wants a sponsor. I'm gonna podcast, and then people are gonna pay me to talk about my podcast on poop and unicorns and video games or whatever I have fun talking about, like the ridiculous things that I have heard. But they don't really want to create quality media, but we've had that conversation. Sponsorship. It's actually not the easiest form of monetization. It seems like the easiest. Get paid to get attention, like whatever. It just isn't. But sponsorship isn't just sponsorship on your podcast itself, because your podcast is a business model, not a standalone podcast, right? So there's 3 different main types of sponsorship, and you gotta get creative with this. When I brought up Star Wars as an example, they don't have Star Wars Land. They don't have their own theme park. They partnered with Disney. Well, Disney bought them, and Disney's leveraging the Star Wars brand, and now through that business, they're making money, right? Through live events. You need to get that creative with your podcast. Media sponsors, these are people who are paying to get exposure to your audience. These are commercials, these are, brought to you bys in a sense. In-kind sponsors, these are the sponsors that you could strategically go to and ask for use of their services because it's either related to the audience and you're going to advertise to them directly, or it's going to benefit their business in another way. This goes back to being creative. An in-kind sponsor doesn't need to advertise to your audience. If you want to build a membership site and you want to go to Rainmaker platform and say, hey, I already have 10,000 people on my list and I want to build a membership site. I want to do a beta with your guys' site. What do you think of that? Start negotiations, get them to let you build that membership site for free instead of paying $79 a month. They get exposure because now you've given them a platform and saying, hey, we're using Rainmaker. You've also cut your costs down immensely. And even though that's not direct monetization, that's numbers. If you can cut those costs down in other ways where you don't need to spend the money, you're going to make that much more money at something else when you go to grow your business in other ways. Signature sponsors. This is where you need to get really creative. When you start to build out that business model, these are sponsors that you can, at a bigger premium, more than just media sponsors, more than just a commercial on your podcast, on the intro or the outro. These are sponsors that you can have a place with things that you do. For this larger amount, for this amount, we'll get you on our site, we'll talk about you on our list, you can have a booth at our live event, you're gonna get exposure to us as a whole. And really leverage that relationship in a bigger way. Build the relationship with the company, not just take their money because you wanna run an ad on your podcast.
When you're reaching out to these companies, are you saying that I have 3 different levels of sponsorship that I would like to engage with you, or are you already targeting them for the type of sponsorship that you have in mind for that relationship?
Most of the time, were you in on the other talk before? Okay, so there was a moment where someone was asking about industry standard for what's charged for sponsorship, and I'm gonna rope that into this. There is no industry standard because major companies who are used to sponsoring don't 100% get how podcasting is going to contribute to their business yet. For some companies, investing in podcasting has worked really well. For others, it hasn't. It's still a little bit of like a Wild West, for lack of a better term. So 90% of the time, the conversation is going to be really free form. You want to take control of the conversation and tell them what you have to offer. I wouldn't say I have these 3 types of levels. Instead, I would say decide what I need from a media sponsor based off of your specific podcast, because there's many different kinds, and decide what I need out of a signature sponsor based off of live events, or let's say I'm doing weekly online digital events, which is another thing that you could give space to. I know people who do it depends on your business model, but I would build packages within these. These are just the kind of relationships you can build. And you should know what you need for your business model. With an in-kind sponsor, I would go to somebody like Rainmaker or ClickFunnels or whatever and just say, hey, I'm looking to do this and I have an audience. I'm not sure if your platform's right for me. What can you guys do for me? Because I'm looking to get them to give me their software for free.
Right.
Versus a media sponsor or a signature sponsor.
What would be a key differentiator between doing this and just having an affiliate relationship with them, that you set up your own funnels through your clickable links on your website that you're pitching as an advertisement for your podcast airs?
So I would equate straight affiliate just as digital e-commerce. That's it. It's standard digital e-commerce. It's not the same as, this is a partnership that you're building with a company to help either them grow or help you both grow and appear good on the media side, right? An affiliate product, even though it can in theory do that, you're basically a mini salesperson for them.
I'm thinking, as a lot of us in here are all new podcasters, it would be easy to get an affiliate relationship. You join a network, you're able to leverage that, and you say, look what I've done for you.
But you can't make a decision just because it's easy. You have to make a decision because it makes sense for your business model.
Right.
So I don't care if it's easier.
Right. So you get actual engagement with them, because if you have zero audience.
No, it doesn't matter. Reaching out to, it's a lot easier to reach out to people than you think. You just need to do it. Don't send a spammy email saying, can I have your time? Can I have your time? Can I have your time? That's dumb. Don't do that. But, hey, I have this either lead with something that's good about them to get their attention. There's a million different ways. Yeah. Be creative about it. But it's about giving to them. So if you're going and you're asking them, not for media or signature sponsorship, those conversations are kind of different because they're negotiations, right? And these are companies that are looking to probably already put their money into advertisement in some way. You just need to make sure it's a deal that makes sense for them. For any other type of or affiliate or special, if you get creative, which I would encourage, and I feel like that's what you're asking about, creative deals, and I want to be clear. When you're getting creative with those, you want to lead with what you're going to give them. Hi, I already have an audience of 10,000. I want to launch a membership site. What can your platform do for me? Hi, I have an audience of only 2,000, but they regularly subscribe to my, like all 2,000 subscribe to my $5 a month thingy, and I'm looking to expand that into this. What can you do for me? I have a really big gain for you, but I'm not sure if your platform's right for me. What can you do to convince me that I should use it? Because it's not just about the dollar signs. You're building a partnership with sponsorships as a whole, even paid sponsors, really. Does that make more sense?
Definitely.
Okay. Okay, digital items. This would include affiliates. Even though I didn't list them, I would equate them to affiliates because anybody can sign up to an affiliate for most things. Affiliate products, a company doesn't even need to care who the fuck you are to let you be an affiliate. They really don't. Sponsorships, you're building, and I want to make this really clear because I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this the other day. Sponsorships are relationship building, not just money grabbing. Digital sale items, like affiliates, like other products, while it is relationship building, while the items matter, well, all of that you need to put out quality product matter, it's a different relationship. It's an exchange of money. And you're a salesman, not a partner. Does that?
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay, so we all know about the bajillion different types of digital products that there could be out there. Informational courses, digital versions of books, access to exclusive groups, music, audio files, services sold online. And you can get creative with this. I have seen podcasters successfully change their intros every month, have new songs made because they're creative, they're musicians, they make new songs, sell those songs on iTunes. And some of this is for like sci-fi stuff. Like not music-related, entertainment-related stuff. It's all about what your audience wants. If you have a really cool intro song and someone's like, yeah, I like that song, I'd want to buy it, why not pop it up on iTunes and get yourself an additional $50 a month? And this goes back to being really creative what it is you're going to offer and thinking about the users and the platforms that they're using. These are people already on iTunes. These are people who are already savvy. There's not going to be anybody on a podcast that's going to not know how to internet, right? So really, any way you want to make a product, you can do it. The best thing about digital products is you make it once, you can leverage it against many, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay, live events. This is a big one because I don't think enough podcasters are leveraging this, but the ones that are doing it are fucking killing it. They're fucking killing it. There's conventions and specialty events like FinCon, and that's fine. And you don't even have to do your own event to leverage that. Podcast movement, I mean, I don't know the inner workings of anything, but podcast movement and FinCon, which is why podcast movement is this room, they're leveraging themselves through a live event that's not necessarily about podcasts, it's about financial media, but we're here talking about podcasting, and by default, we will talk about podcast movement. You can do that with your podcast by going to live events, even though you're a digital show. You can set up live recordings and do little tours. It doesn't even have to be extreme, just a couple in major cities, depending on your audience. And just record your podcast in front of people who want to listen to your podcast anyway and charge for the tickets because they want that. They want to be a part of the experience and they want to be part of your creation, right? Meetups. There was an individual I connected with, I don't know if it was this 2016 podcast movement, but it was like 2015. One of the Disney guys, he does paid meetups to Disneyland on the regular. And that is his revenue stream. His podcast is all about Disney stuff, and people meet up and go to Disneyland together. I think so, yeah. I'd remember him if I saw his face. That's what happens when you go to a convention. But Disneyland podcasts. I mean, it might seem very obvious because then you can go to Disney. I think his was actually Disney World. I'm from LA, so I assume Disneyland. But that doesn't mean you can't leverage that in other ways. Another really good example, if you guys have ever heard of a site called Atlas Obscura, maybe not. But what they do is they bring up locations that are really independent and like unique. And they also have their content marketing strategy, by the way, is genius because they have a lot of really cool, funky blog posts to just like disappear in the information hole. They do meetups. I'd say maybe about like once every couple months in major cities. But they do meetups and they go on excursions with people to go look at these unique buildings or these locations where really interesting things happened. So there's always a way to kind of build that into your model, right? And then book tours, that's depending on what your platform is. If you're doing any form of speaking or, it depends on your brand, right? That one's a little bit more of a broad one, but I put it up there. Okay, merchandise. This is one that I think a lot of podcasters do poorly, but they're all excited to do because all you have to do is sign up to a shitty site that'll put your logo on anything. But you can sell anything. You can sell freaking anything. If you want a really good example of a company that's doing it right or a podcast that's doing it right, go to Welcome to Night Vale.
What is that again?
Night Vale, Welcome to Night Vale. And they have leggings, they have pins, they have mouse pads, they have t-shirts, but it's not a shirt with their logo on it. It's stuff that engages their stories, their characters. But let's say your content's more dry, because we're at a financial conference. You guys know who Philip DeFranco is from YouTube. Have you watched his videos within the past couple of years at all? He will say, we have this shirt with these words on it, available for only a week. Go to our store and buy it. Relevant to whatever news content they're talking about that day. It's not pretty, it doesn't need to be well designed, but it's within context, and it has humor behind it, and it's not just the logo, and it's time sensitive, and it motivates people to want to go and be a part of that because they really enjoy whatever the content is that you're bringing, like they would with Philip DeFranco. And that's another really like on-the-nose one. You can go and see what they're doing. Okay, crowdfunding and Patreon. So I almost didn't put this one in here, only because too many people use it as a failure point for their business without realizing that things like Kickstarter, Patreon, all those things, I hope I'm saying, I've never known how, Patreon? Instead of realizing that they're marketing platforms for your business, just like your podcast is. At the same time, they're revenue streams. Who in here knows who Patreon is? Okay. I assume everybody knows what Kickstarter is? Okay. So Patreon is basically an ability to, there are podcasts on there, there's magazines, there's comics, there's all kinds of stuff on there. So let's say you have a favorite artist that you follow. I actually have a friend that's doing this right now pretty successfully. She came up with this story, this comic called Find Kelly Green. And she'd been trying to do it freelance for a really long time. She has a whole storyline planned. She wants to eventually make it an animated series, the whole 9 yards, right? She goes to conventions really regularly, has booths, people buy her artwork. She's built a list. Very amateur, very small though, right? Well, she decided to launch a Patreon. And the goal is to make enough money so that she can leverage her time to actually work on making the comic and the story come to life that she's built this following talking about with. With Patreon, you can set your own donation goals and things that you're gonna give. So you could do like, say, $5 a month, in this example, $5 a month to watch me draw the comic, right? And you get to hang out. $20 a month and we'll play video games together. Like, you can be really random. It doesn't have to be related to what it is that you're doing, but you're giving your audience something back in return like you would with Kickstarter, but it's a monthly investment, right? So what's really cool about Patreon and Kickstarter and things like that, but what also really sucks about it is it's a direct tie to your fans and how much they're willing to give versus how much you're willing to give. At the same time, I think there's a lot of confusion on those platforms because people look at it as if they're easier to get funding on than they really are. Because you're doing direct fan service. And that takes more work than really marketing the rest of your business like a business, depending on what your goals are. Some of you guys who are maybe just starting to do podcasting part-time to grow another aspect of your business, It could be a really good platform depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you get a series of fans that are excited about the things you're talking about and you've been talking about making an app for a while, instead of doing a Kickstarter, you could do a monthly goal to fund a person to help get that app out so they could get that tool that they don't want to build themselves, right? So instead of raising the money to just get the thing like you do in Kickstarter, you're kind of equating your time for money and giving that time to your audience with them paying you, instead of having to hopefully pay out and do the work with whatever you're able to raise, if you even meet your Kickstarter goal, right? Now, the other really exciting thing, however, in all of these platforms, especially Patreon, and I know I'm mentioning them a lot, but it's just because they're doing right now a really good job with it, there's community built within the website that you can leverage as yourselves as podcasters to partner with those that are using Patreon for equal exposure and thus monetization. Because guess what? They already have followers who are spending money, right? And there are so many different forms of media that are on there that you can use for yourself in all of the ways we've already talked about. All right, indirectly through platforming. This is the one that we hear about a lot. Oh, you're going to build a platform, you're going to write a book, and you're going to sell out of the back of a room, you're going to be a millionaire, traveling everywhere and speaking. We've all kind of heard that kind of stuff, right? But it's true, it does work. So platforming. I think a lot of times when people are getting involved with media, with their blogging, with podcasting, with YouTube, whatever it might be, they're very short-sighted. They have an idea. Man, that idea could be profitable. They don't have a business, right? And then they get burnt out on that idea in the long run. When you're looking at platforming for yourself and podcasting, the first thing you have to accept is this is something that is digital and it is online. And in 5 years, it might not work the way that it does today. Instead of podcasting, maybe video makes a really big, like YouTube doubles or a YouTube competitor comes out. Before YouTube, I don't know how long you guys have been on the internet, it was all E-Bombs world. And where did that go? In Newgrounds. Where those are sites that, I mean, if you hadn't been around or seen them at all, you wouldn't know that they existed. They're still around, but nobody uses them, right? So when you're looking at your podcasting, what you're deciding to do with it right now, you don't need to be 100% clear. You can figure it out as you're going, but you need to figure out what kind of platform you either want to build for the business or for yourself and how that's going to contribute to the end goal. And platforming is kind of vague, right? It's almost confusing. Sometimes when people are just getting started, it feels overwhelming, but it just basically means, who are you and what do you stand for? So who are you, what do you stand for?
I'm Niall Bayer, and I'm trying to help people achieve their goals at a faster rate.
Okay, so if you did that in a podcast and you worked really hard at that podcast and podcasting was no longer the best platform for that, if that's all you focused on for your content and your platform, you could pull that to other areas, right? If you're focusing on, and this goes to figuring out your show and all those other things, now that you know that, I'm assuming, do you have other goals for your business model, the other revenue streams we've talked about?
Absolutely.
Okay, what?
Just came from the webinar breakout session, so that's a big idea.
Mm-hmm. But that's just a marketing platform. That's not a
right.
revenue stream.
2 education modules on how to make better financial decisions with your life.
Online programs, books, what?
Programs, not ebooks, but being able to have courses and modules that aren't a membership management, so it's not constantly having to update it, but being able to sell them a course that is made in post-production, more professional style.
Okay. And if you're looking at platforming for your business as a whole, or for yourself long term, what would that look like in 5 to 10 years?
Hopefully as big as possible. I'm thinking as long term as possible. Like you're saying, I'm not
Right.
thinking short term about it. I'm just trying to create a community and figure out what they like and then interact with them and grow and expand with them at the same time.
Okay, so let's say
5 million a month.
5 million. Let's say it fails.
Okay.
Okay? What kind of platform would you build with your podcast? Assuming it fails in 5 years.
What do you mean by platform?
What platform could you build that could go into another business model for you as an individual? If you're a Kevin Smith, as an example, who's done, I can't even count how many podcasts on how many different subjects.
It could be on anything that I like as far as, what
Okay.
I appreciate and pass on to people.
So when
It's
we
a
are,
music podcast. It could go easily into something like that.
maybe. So, yeah, it can.
Right.
But so my main point here is start thinking about yourself if you're on your podcast, yourself as a media personality. It's not yourself as going and being $1 million speaker. It's yourself as a media personality and what that brand is projecting, even outside of whatever your podcast is about.
So you can talk about anything, is what you're saying.
So you could go out and you could eventually, if you're really passionate about music, you could go and do a music podcast. And it would be a natural transition and people would even follow you and you would build a platform from it. I don't think a lot of people think about being a well-rounded entertainer, about being a media personality in the podcasting space, but that's what you are.
You brand yourself or you brand your brand?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Because the brand can't leave and go and do other things as much as I could.
So I mentioned Star Trek earlier, right?
Right.
Do you know who Patrick Stewart is?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think of Star Trek, a lot of people think Patrick Stewart. But if you think Patrick Stewart, does he not also have his own independent brand? It's the exact same thing. And now Star Wars is association with Disneyland. Disneyland and Disney World still have their own brand, but Star Wars is its own independent brand within that. You are your own independent brand within the show. And that's not to say that you can't be the show's brand too. We see that with like Pat Flynn and Smart Passive Income. If he wasn't doing the Smart Passive Income podcast, it wouldn't be Smart Passive Income anymore. But he could shut down the Smart Passive Income podcast, shut down the Smart Passive Income blog, and go do something else with his personal brand.
So do you have a theory as to like how that transformation happens?
What do you mean by transformation?
So obviously, when someone starts out with like, let's say Pat Flynn,
Mm-hmm.
whenever he started,
Right.
it was initially some URL and him, right? And then at what point could you pinpoint to say that okay, well, or Pat Flynn took some type of a intended action
Mm-hmm.
to like become its own like Pat Flynn? Isn't it? I guess what I'm trying to say is that isn't it just like a side effect of being like famous?
No, I would say no.
So like, if it's not a side effect, then like how do you actually?
Part of it's organic because you have to, a lot of us are individuals, right? We're not businesses. There are some other podcasts out there that have whole teams that put marketing effort into them getting the results that they have, really big podcasts. And we don't have that benefit as individuals, right? So they have those teams bringing that together for them. So that's part of a component and a thing you need to take into consideration. If you're doing this as an individual, it's going to be more organic, but you should still have it in the back of your mind. Pat Flynn, very genuine, very great guy. I wouldn't say he's a friend of mine, but I've spent time with him on an individual level, right? There's an intentional decision that this is a business and these are media platforms and I need to use them as such. And figuring out and learning what that looks like for a brand is another conversation altogether. But there's a decision. It actually took Pat Flynn years from the time he thought about doing a podcast to launching his podcast. And part of that was the fact that he is a prolific blogger. He's done a lot of things online. He's good at what he does, and he knows that he would be committing to another media outlet, media expansion, right? And that takes time and effort. That's why there's a lot of other things. I mean, he has talks about it and like not moving forward. But it's an active choice. That this is me that I'm projecting. Maybe it's not all scripted or laid out in a perfect brand world, but you're actively approaching it as this is a media outlet and I'm using it as a platform and such. Not just I'm going to podcast and figure out who I am along the way and then, yeah. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big topic.
It is. It's so broad. There's so many aspects.
I mean, I think it, to specifically see how someone would make a decision going with that strategy as opposed to, not doing that. I think that would be insightful, but I guess it'd be hard to kind of like see. Okay, well.
But I think at the end of the day, no matter what, there has to be a conscious decision to be a good creator, a good producer, and that means paying attention to your timing, paying attention to your pacing, how you're creating content, if it is engaging or entertaining. I don't care if you're doing a finance show, If it's not entertaining, people aren't going to listen to your podcast. If you pop your peas, they're going to turn that podcast off, right? No matter what, if you're entering the space, you're making a conscious choice to create quality media. And that means you need to treat it like a media platform if you're going to get results. Which means there's you as the individual, just like any form of media. Name any show, name any movie, name a video game, name fucking anything. There are the characters within it, almost as if you're a character in your own show. Not saying you have to pretend to be somebody other than you are. And then there's the brand of the show. And those are media platforms. That's just how media platforming works. And you got to make that choice from the beginning, or you're going to stay in hobby zone all day and not make any money. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Any other questions? No?
So ultimately, kind of everything stems from what you project to be what you stand for, right? Like.
Well, absolutely, and you can be genuine with it or not.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be. I mean, I would hope if you're genuine, obviously.
Well, if you're not genuine, people can smell it from a mile away, and they're gone.
It's hard on you to be like, fake all the time. But like, I mean, ultimately, what other people see is like Coke is like, basically it's like, how are you different from other people?
I don't think I understand.
I guess like, so I don't know anything about personal branding, obviously, but like, does it kind of work like similar to product branding, where you obviously like things like Nike stands for something, or like.
Absolutely. We were talking about Pat Flynn. What does Pat Flynn stand for?
I mean, to me,
smart passive income. He's a smart passive income guy.
But exactly, but like I thought we were trying to like decouple Pat Flynn from smart passive income.
Okay, so the point is he could remove himself from smart passive income and still go and do something else and have that recognition, because he's put himself in the forefront and he's made it with Pat Flynn. It's not the Smart Passive Income podcast and Pat Flynn happens to be the host. It's Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn, which is a conscious decision. It's not just the Smart Passive Income blog, it's Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn. Versus, like, there's a couple of like NPR shows, right? They're just NPR. The hosts of the shows, even if you follow them semi-regularly, you might not even notice if they interchange in or out, right? At the same time, they're building a platform for themselves because they have that under their belt. But they don't have they haven't done the work or effort in what they're doing for their platforming to have that personal brand to separate themselves. Is that more clear?
Yeah, I think where it clicked was like when you said it's smart passive with Pat Flynn. He's like literally at the forefront.
Yeah, right.
Instead of saying smart passive income and then your host,
Right.
I think it's like that difference. It's subtle, but yeah.
But that's branding. So when you're talking about the branding, that is branding.
Right.
So it's like a complicated question. Technically, that's product branding in and of itself. But it can get more complex within variances of that. But it's also about how you project yourself as an individual within your show. If you don't build a personal brand for yourself and your podcast as an individual, you're fucking yourself from the get-go. Because we as individuals don't have the power of major studios to leverage an audience. So even if a show is an absolute failure, those 5 hardcore fans you get are going to follow you to the next show. And if that show's a failure and you gain 5 more fans, it's going to be an effect if you personally brand from the beginning.
What do you view as the future of podcasting?
I think, I wouldn't say podcasting's hit its peak at any point whatsoever. I would say I feel podcasting is replacing, just as YouTube has, the way we consume information and the way we find news and the way we tell stories. I think it's replacing old school, I mean, you'd say TV replaced radio, but guess what? Radios are still in all of our cars. And how many times is your phone battery basically dead so you turn on the radio? We still use radio, right? So I think podcasting will be around for a while. I think over the next couple years, it's going to continue to grow.
In listeners or content
Probably both. I can't see it not going both ways. I think we're hitting a flux where we're getting a lot of people just kind of jumping on the bandwagon right now in terms of content creation. And then that's going to go down, but it will continue to still have an upward growth overall, if we were looking at it, like, say, in a graph. But in terms of users, I think it's only going to go up, because the reality is, and this is the way I think about it, so I'm going to be a little bit morbid. Old people are going to die, young people are going to get older.
You know, the flip side of it says old folks. Speaking to that group, we're tuning in.
Right.
I noticed the new cars, the Chevys and so on, they have a sticker on board.
They do.
They do. The guy that does the podcast with me is 70.
Right.
He couldn't spell podcast February last
But we do also have to accept the fact that, and I'm not belittling, like, it's awesome, yeah.
Just to be anxious is all is. What I think is going to happen is there will be a generational appeal. Because frankly, many of the other demographics don't have much money.
No, that's true.
And so if you think about, like for me, my podcast that I'll do for my practice has zero to do with an audience. I could give two shits if they listen.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm interested in is talking to the business leaders and focusing on them, their story, what they did, how they got there, what advice they provide.
Right.
And so what I'm showcasing is that contributor to the community that's silent and work disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell a story, and it's an opportunity for me to take and create a relationship.
Right. For you.
That's it. That's it. That's all I'm interested in. I mean, if two people listen, it's probably his mom
But see,
and his kids.
your use of podcasting is slightly different. Now, if there's anything I would like to see happen in the future of podcasting, is more social collaboration like we see on YouTube. Podcasting is the audio version of YouTube, really, like, as a whole. It's a place where anybody can come and create content and put it out, as long as you're willing to do it regularly enough and you're willing to be an entertainer, no matter what it is you want to create, right? So when we look at the future of podcasting, it's gonna, I wouldn't say it'll go the way of, say, XM radio, like subscribed radio services. It's definitely not gonna go that route, but it's going to continue to grow. Definitely more in listenership, because the markets are going to mature. And it's just going to be the case. That's just, it's what happens. It's not whether or not listeners increase, it's we're increasing the amount of audience members we have that know how to use the technology and are already natural with it.
Have you seen anybody talking at any length about measurement tools similar to Facebook for the demographics of the listeners?
But no.
You know, me neither. I mean, you know, like, wouldn't you like to say with your show, my demographic is from here to there?
The difficulty is the biggest platform that's available is iTunes, and they give us no data.
You know, the only way I've considered, because I actually have a podcast on whitetail deer hunting. And we took the emails from that, dumped it into Facebook, and did an audience lookalike, and did the research on Facebook.
You can do that with people who choose to subscribe to your newsletter, but you get zero data from iTunes, which is the largest platform. They give you nothing. They give you downloads. That's all you get. And that's one of the hardest things with podcasting, actually, because it means that you have to constantly engage your audience to try and figure out what's going on next. Yeah?
Have you ever done a reader survey?
I have. Like I said, you have to constantly engage. But it's not going to hold true across all podcasts or all.
What does your survey look? I'm curious. What does your survey look like? What are you asking in the survey? Is it just demographics? You're asking them, are we fulfilling what you're looking for?
Well, if I'm looking for demographic information and a list is large enough, this is like for other people who I consult with too. You can just take whatever their email marketing list is and import it in Facebook and see what data you can get from that, and you'll be happy. That'll be good. You'll get so much just data from that. If I were to do a survey to my audience, not trying to, Google, like Facebook stalk them, for lack of a better term, to get that information, I would first focus on what my business goals are and how I can better phrase that to them. Meaning, what can I do to serve you? We were talking about, like, you're gonna go to somebody as an in-kind sponsor. I have this, what can you do for me? It's almost the same thing, but with your audience. I have this for you, by the way, could you answer this for me?
So how do your sponsors, if you can't go to the sponsor and say, well, my average listener is 37 years old and has 150,000 income, like what?
You can if you have an email list.
But then what is the ROI, or what is the metric that if you have a sponsor come in and take the pre-roll and the spot in the middle of the podcast, what is the metric that you go back then and provide to that sponsor to say, we fulfilled your advertising?
Downloads and plays, because they're paying it's cost per mil. Do you know that term?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically like per 1,000 impression.
So that's the only thing they're asking for? Have they got
That's the only thing you can charge for with podcasting. We don't even, you can't even get really good, there are places that claim that they do it, but the data sometimes, based off of my experience, can go wonky, so I won't mention places because I don't want to disparage, because I know their teams and they're actively working, so I don't want to make them sound bad when I know they're making it better. But we can't even get like how far they've listened into the episode all the time, because iTunes does not share that information. And that's one of the unfortunate things with podcasting. That's one of the things that scares me as a podcaster. If my content that I can create and host independently is under control, under my most major distributor, and I have no information, no data, all you can go is by impressions, by plays. That is the only metric you have, unless you do active marketing, which is why platform building and everything else is so important. You got to get people off that podcast and onto somewhere else so you can get that data to help you more with sponsors, to help you more with other revenue streams. It's vital, in fact, I would say. Because iTunes just doesn't give you the data. Not for you, can't have. Yeah?
I'm assuming that, is there a lot to sort of read about on the internet of how to bootstrap your podcast when you initially start out? How to
Pat Flynn has a really great tutorial. John Lee Dumas has one too.
podcast marketing, I guess.
Yeah, and then there's also, well, just in getting the podcast up and going, that's the tech side of running a podcast. If you're talking about marketing a podcast, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. It's a media platform. It's just a media business. Market it like a magazine, market it like a movie, market it like a TV show. It's just a media platform. You wanna figure out how people get sponsorship for TV shows, go and research that to learn sponsorship. Don't go pay somebody money just because they say that sponsorship for podcasting is its own unique butterfly. There's more than enough articles on how TV and movies and all of that get funding before they even go out that you can use as education for yourself if you look at podcasting like a media platform, not just podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine most of the podcast discovery comes from like search engine on the iTunes.
Yeah,
Right,
it does.
So you have to rank well for those keywords, right?
But the marketing, but that's really like basic level. Again, it's platform building. The podcast isn't the business. The podcast is a media platform for a business.
Yeah.
So like marketing yourself strictly on iTunes, like really the majority of people who buy things, that will buy things, or you're gonna have your hardcore fans that follow everything, and if you're really lucky, but this is like literally the 2% of podcasters. If you're really lucky, you amass an audience and have that big following. But let's be realistic, not for the sake of thinking small, but for the sake of making it sustainable so you can grow more later, right? You're not gonna have that. But most people will attach themselves to an idea, watch a video, listen to a podcast. You'll tell them you have a t-shirt with funny sayings on it, and they'll go, I want that shirt, and they'll buy it for 20 bucks. That's monetization of your podcast. And that's marketing of the podcast. Because now you've asked them to leave to go to your website to buy something, and now you have their email address, and then you can target them later in the future. And then you could also use that information to go out to live events. Like, it's a ecosystem. There's these things that you need to make plug into it. There's no one revenue stream. And it's not new. It's not new at all. Radio's been doing it for years. TV has been doing it for years. The movie industry, the video game industry, they've all been doing it for years. None of it is new. Does that answer? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that might be about it, guys. Yeah, that's it. Yay!